Thank you for joining us for this week's message at Crosswind Church. In the final sermon in the series Spark, we learn that we should speak words that build up and not that tear down. If you should have any questions about this message or about Crosswind Church, please visit our website, www.crosswindchurch.net, or email us at info@crosswindchurch.net.
If you have your Bibles, go ahead and grab them. We're going to be in the book of Ephesians today, Ephesians chapter 4. When I started pastoring in Alabama, I went to this church, First Baptist of Hayden, and we didn't have, or at the time, we had a children's church program, just an environment for our kids to go and that sort of thing. And I can't remember how long I'd been when I was approached by the director of that program. I'd been there just a short period of time. She came to me and she said, "Hey, I hear that services are going well, and I hear that that things are great. But I haven't been in church since you've been here. I haven't been able to be in worship because I'm doing children's church every week." And I said, "Well, why in the world are you having to do children's church every week?" And she said, "Well, we just can't recruit volunteers. We've had trouble getting volunteers for children's church, and so it just kind of falls on me. Do you have any suggestions? Maybe something that we can do to make it better?" And I went, "Let's stop having children's church. It's an easy solution. Like, we don't have volunteers, we won't do the program, and kids can just hang out with parents during worship." And so we did. And for a couple of years after I got there, I don't remember the exact time frame, but for a couple of years we didn't have children's church. Kids just hung out with us in the sanctuary, and it was a good time. But as you can imagine, as some kids started getting older and parents were kind of wrestling with them, and put them in headlocks and giving them noogies during the service and that sort of stuff, some parents kind of said, "Hey, it'd be nice to have a program where our kids could go, an environment that's suitable for them." And so we started our kids worship program again. Now, Emma was old enough. Kids worship for us at Hayden was ages 4 years old through second grade, if I'm not mistaken, and then we expanded it at one point, but that was kind of where it started, 4 years old through second grade. And so Emma was always old enough to be a part of it, but I can remember when Abby got to go to kids worship for the first time. We thought we were cool because we spelled it with Z, because of kids worship. That's how you know something's hip. Anyway. So Abby got to go. She turned 4, and she was going to go to kids worship for the very first time. I'm so thankful she's not in here because she'd be embarrassed if I told her the story. No. Anyway. I can remember she goes. She's so excited. The time comes in the service for them to be dismissed to kids worship, and her older sister grabs her hand, and they part off. They go, and we're so excited. Yay! Abby gets to go to kids worship for the first time today. And afterwards, we had to go pick our kids up, kind of like you do here. I had to go pick up our kids, and so I kind of worked my way down to the kids' worship room. And there the teacher looks at me, and she's like, "Oh, let's talk about Abby today." I don't know what in the world happened with Abby. And so what happened? Well, we have time in kids' worship. We sing songs, we do crafts, we teach a lesson, and we were kind of going through the lesson, and Abby raised her hand in the lesson, and it's her first day in kids worship, and so I kind of paused the lesson, and I said, "Abby, what is it you have to say?" And Abby just out of the blue just says, "Sometimes we're at home, my daddy likes to toot." That's what she said, right? Just right there in the middle of kids worship. Right in the middle of the lesson. That's what my Abby came up with. I love that about kids, though. Let's just be honest. If you haven't had a chance to talk with a toddler, man, do that. Like, sit down and chat with them, because they have not yet developed the filter of what's socially acceptable to say and what isn't socially acceptable to say, right? They'll tell you anything and everything, and they're the most amazing people. They'll tell you about Mama and Daddy and what he said to Mama and what Mama said to Daddy and all of that. They'll just go all into all that. Toddlers are amazing because they haven't developed that filter that we all have that says this is socially appropriate in our society, this is not socially appropriate in our society to say. And as they grow up, they kind of grow out of that. It's so sad because it's just kind of neat for them to just say whatever is on the top of their mind. But we know, don't we? We know that some things are okay in certain environments, some things are not okay to say in certain environments. And as we move into the final week of the series called Spark, where we're talking about the power that we have in our tongues and with our words, I thought it would be a great place to kind of end up with some very practical teaching from the Apostle Paul on what we should say and what we should not say as followers of Jesus Christ. If you're here today and you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, you get a pass. You can just sit back and pass judgment and all the rest of us, because this is something that for Christians is not necessarily a suggestion. It's an imperative. This is the way we should kind of talk with one another. Now, in the first week of the series, what we learned is that we have an enormous power with our words. In fact, that those words that we carry with us can be destructive. They can tear other people down. Remember, we talked about how what a great force forest is set ablaze by such a small spark, and how if we don't learn how to control our tongues and our words, then ultimately will lead in the wake of our lives broken relationships, hurt feelings, bruised and battered egos, and just really will end up leaving a pathway of destruction behind us as we move forward with life if we don't figure out how to do that. The second week we said that it's not just as simple as putting up filters in front of your mouth, although that's important, because Jesus tells us that what comes out of our mouth is just a reflection of what is really in our heart. And so really, if we're going to battle this, we have to ask God to begin changing our hearts. And that was the week that I asked you to kind of begin praying with me. God, help me to see people the way that you see people, right? And then last week we said that maybe the most powerful thing you can do with your words is not use them. Maybe the most powerful thing you can do with your tongue is to still it, fight it, hold it, whatever it is. Because we said that sometimes we spend so much time talking and not enough time listening that we end up missing what God is trying to tell us. We end up missing what other people are trying to tell us. And although we hear words coming out of their mouth, we don't necessarily pay attention to what is happening. So last week we said maybe sometimes we just need to shh and listen. And so today we're going to kind of look at the other side of the coin, because as Paul talks to us about the way as Christians we should handle our words and our mouths, one of the things that he's going to talk about is how although your words have a power to destroy and kind of break down, your words also have a power to kind of build up and to kind of move someone in a positive direction. Now, I'm a preacher, and so you remember those commercials where like the nerds showed up and it was like my rock stars are not your rock stars, right? As a pastor, as a preacher, like I have rock stars. People that are in the ministry that like I look up to and they seem to be doing good jobs, and they're kind of my rock stars. I get Twitter pated when I get around them, right? I get kind of like celebrity shock. I know that's really bad, but I do. Anyway, and one of those individuals is a man that I want to tell you about, a man by the name of R.T. Kendall. You guys don't know who he is, and that's okay. R.T. Kendall graduated from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary up in Louisville, and later went on to Westminster Chapel, where he was a pastor there in London for 25 years. And in that process of him pastoring, he wrote a number of books, one of which is kind of the hallmark, benchmark book on forgiveness. It's called Total Forgiveness. If you haven't had a chance to read it, pick it up and read it. It's absolutely amazing. And while I was in Fort Worth, Texas, we had an opportunity for him to come to our church and speak this message of total forgiveness. And so he came. Our pastor happened to be out of town when R.T. came. I call him R.T. because we're on a first-name basis now, Dr. Kendall. He lives in Nashville now at this point. But anyway, so Dr. Kendall came, and I kind of got to be host to R.T. And after he spoke an amazing message on forgiveness, we went out to eat dinner, me and R.T. Kendall and another one of my kind of like rock stars in the ministry, a guy by the name of James Leo Garrett, who wrote the systematic theology textbook that I used in seminary. We all go out to eat. It's James Leo Garrett, Dr. James Leo Garrett, Dr. R.T. Kendall, Jeremy Powell, right? And we go, I don't know what's so funny about that, but it was. And so we go out to dinner, and we're sitting around the table. Emma was in a little pumpkin seat. Jody was there with us. And I'm sitting next to R.T. Kendall. Like, this is just amazing. I'm just going to be quiet and just soak in everything they have to say. And R.T. Kendall turns to me and goes, "Hey, Dr. Garrett has told me a little bit about your story. Tell me a little of your story. Tell me how you were called in the ministry and how Jesus came to be your Lord and all that." So I just briefly shared my testimony with Dr. Kendall. And Dr. Kendall just listens. He's so, he's amazing. R.T. Kendall's listening to my story. Like, it was amazing to me. You don't even know who he is, but just trust me. It's cool. It's cool for me, right? It's a rock star moment. Anyway, and so like he's listening to my story, and he stops, and he made this statement. He turned to James Leo Garrett. Dr. Garrett, he turned to Dr. Garrett, and he goes, "James," actually he calls him Leo. "Leo, I want to watch this guy. I can't wait to see what God does with this guy." I looked at Jody, I was like, right? I can't believe those words, right, just meant so much to me. That wasn't anything that came from me. It was just, "Hey, man, your story's so cool. I think God might have something planned for you. I'd love to see what that is. I can't wait. I want to make sure I follow your career, and I know what's kind of going on with you." And I remember thinking, man, those words mean so much to me. Those were, I walked out of that restaurant on cloud nine. I don't remember what else happened, except I had dinner with James Leo Garrett and R.T. Kendall, and R.T. Kendall said, "I can't wait to see what God does in this guy's life." It was so amazing. Isn't it neat how when some people speak words into your life, it just has that ability to build you up, to build a confidence or something inside of you that wasn't there before. I can remember my wife. In fact, she's an amazing teacher. She connects with students better than anybody I've ever seen in my life. And her first teaching job was teaching math to middle school students. Oh my goodness gracious. at Christian County Middle School up in Kentucky. And she went in and she was teaching these students. And I remember one particular day, she was talking to them and she made the statement. She said, what is it you want to be when you grow up? What is it you want to do when you grow up? And a couple of the kids in the class, middle school, 7th graders, they were like, Miss Powell, what can we do? She said, well, you can do anything you want to do. You can dream as big as you want to dream. You can go where you want to go. You can be whatever you want to be. And one of those students said something in my life, in her class, that just really kind of shocked me. And he made the statement. He said, no one has ever told us that. I'm thinking about that. How many times has my life been propelled? How many times has your life been propelled by individuals that spoke words of encouragement into your life? Where they looked at you and said, hey, you know what? You're worth it. Hey, you know what? You're smart enough. You're pretty enough. Hey, you know what? You're worth the effort. You can do whatever you want to do. You can go wherever you want to do. Hey, you did a great job with that. And in just a compliment or a few words, they stirred up something inside of you. They built you up. They edified you. They made you feel like you were somebody or something. And if we sat here for long enough and went around the room and shared our stories, ultimately, I hope all of you can come up with a story of someone who had spoken those types of words into your life. As we move forward and conclude this series, where we talk about our language and our words, I want us to learn from Paul what is appropriate for those of us that are followers of Jesus Christ and what is not appropriate for those of us as followers of Jesus Christ, with the way that we use our tongues. And here's my promise to you. I'm only going to talk about one verse today, so we can finish early and eat good food. Okay? Because I can already smell it. So let's look at Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. As you're turning there, let me tell you a little bit about what Paul is writing here. Now, Paul, in most of his letters, has what's known as like a theological section where he kind of outlays some theological truth. And then he has a very practical section which kind of talks about how now you put into practice what it is I just told you. Sometimes I like to refer to it as there's a what part of Paul's letters and there's a so what part of Paul's letters. Here's what he wants you to know, and now here's what you do with it. And as we move into chapter 4 of the book of Ephesians, he's kind of moved into that practical application of what it is he's been talking about earlier in his book. And ultimately, he's going to start kind of in verse 17 talking about how we need to become more like Jesus, taking off the old self and putting on the new self. When you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you're a new creation. No longer should you live the way that you used to live. You're going to be different. Christ is going to change you. And then as he moves towards the end of chapter 4, he begins to give you some very practical ways that this plays itself out in the life of a believer. And we're going to talk about just one of those verses as we move forward. Chapter 4 of the book of Ephesians, and we're going to read what Paul writes in verse 29. He says this: "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." Now let's break that into two parts. There's a negative and there's a positive. First, he starts out by saying, look, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouth. Basically, that little word corrupting is the same word that's used to describe rotten fish or rotting garbage. Right? It's this idea of something that's decomposing or corrupting or bad. And he said that stuff just needs to go away from your mouth. Now, let me tell you the truth about those kind of corrupting words or those kind of corrupting, that corrupting talk that kind of comes out of your mouth. You see, you may say 1,000 positive things in one day, but the thing that the other person remembers is that one negative. See, part of my job is I get to stand up here and I get to talk to you guys every week. You can talk to my wife. It's a real bad thing that I do. And every week there are folks, I'm so thankful for you, that come up and pat me on the back, good job, or you send me emails, and I'm so thankful for that. I really, really, really am. But then there's one, right? That'll be like, hey, I wish you'd done this different. How come you didn't say this? Or, hey, you're wrong about this. Or, hey, I know that you studied this for weeks to prepare for this lesson, but I thought about it for 15 minutes, and I think you're wrong, and all of that kind of stuff, right? And listen, all that's fine and good. You have every bit of right to say that. I'm not trying to say, but can I tell you what sticks in my mind? It's not the 100 people that came up and said, hey, man, that changed my life, or hey, God really spoke for you today. It's none of that. It's that one negative that I'm laying in bed going like, man, they're right. You know what? I'm horrible. I can't believe. And this is just the truth about this kind of talk, isn't it? It's the truth about the negative, isn't it? That we can say to our spouses 1,000 positive things, but the one negative is the one that kind of sticks with them, and it's the one that impacts them the most. And so what Paul says is just really simple. Look, you've got to learn to take those types of words, those types of sentences, that kind of language out of your mouth. Let none of that, no corrupting talk, no negative talk come out of your mouth, period, end of discussion. Now, can I just tell you something? I am an outside processor. Let me tell you what that means. That means I'm wired to organize chaos outside of my head, right? That means that a thought hasn't really been a thought in my life until I've spoken it out loud. Now, what that means is I will eventually land the plane, but I may nearly wreck it a few times before I get there. And it also means that just because I say something, that doesn't mean that I believe it, and it doesn't mean that it's true. Conversations with me sometimes can be incredibly frustrating because I will contradict myself in 2 sentences that go side to side because it has to happen outside of my head. All right? Now, my wife is an internal processor. That means that she processes the chaos inside of her brain, and when words come out of her mouth, they're already thought through. She already knows what she's saying. She kind of means it when it comes out. That's the way things kind of work. But can I just tell you what that means in our house? It means a lot of times I say so many words that I don't know what words I've said that has shut her down. Right? I say so many words that I don't know what was the one thing that I didn't really mean, that I kind of meant, that came out, that has really hurt her feelings. And now I don't know what that is because I've said so much. And do you know what that means in our house? Maybe some of you all have outside processor husbands or outside processor wives. It means I spend a lot of time following my wife around the house going, so what's wrong? So what's wrong? What's wrong? You gotta talk to me. If you don't talk to me, then we don't have anything. We gotta communicate here, right? And I'm talking with that because I say so many things. But let me tell you what the book of Proverbs, chapter 10, verse 19 says. It says, where words are many, sin is present. We have to be careful. Sometimes as outside processors, we have to be really cautious what it is that we say and how we say it, because it's not the many words that are good that are remembered. It's that one kind of negative that gets in there and corrupts everything. Have you ever bought a bunch of apples that has one in there that's kind of going rotten? Do you know that the saying, one rotten apple spoils the whole bunch? That's true. Those apples release a chemical that causes the other apples to begin to decompose, and your words are that way as well. When your corrupting talk exits out of your mouth, it has a way of spoiling every other word that you've said. Paul says, get rid of it. Let none of that talk happen. Now, let's be real for just a minute. I know that I could probably talk to some of you and go, yeah, in anger, one time I said something that was negative, hurt somebody's feelings, or I kind of outside processed too, like you, Jeremy, and so I said some things that I didn't mean to say, and I said some things that were maybe hurtful, and yeah, I said it to their face, and yeah, it upset them. But if we just think back, can we think back to like high school, or maybe your work environment just a little bit? Oftentimes it's not the things that people say to you that hurt so bad, it's the things they say about you, isn't it? It's the things that kind of get circulated around about you that are about 25% true and 75% made up. It's that gossip, it's that slander. And we live in a society that makes that okay. There's even a magazine that does gossip called Okay, right? I mean, and you walk through the shopping line and you see the headlines, and you see the magazines, and you see the news articles about what's going on and who's sleeping with who, and who's dating who, and who is with whose girlfriend, and who's with whose boyfriend, and we got pictures, and they were doing this there, and this baby and that baby, and drug addiction and rehab, and you read all of it, and it's just gossip, and it's just smut. And can I be honest with you, I think oftentimes it's the things that are said about people that hurt a lot more than the things that are said to people. And as followers of Jesus Christ, we've got to get rid of that corrupting talk. We've got to push that out of our vocabulary. That doesn't need to be there. Another thing that's happening in our society that Paul had no way of kind of foreseeing when he wrote this a couple thousand years ago is the fact that social media has now allowed us to be able to talk about people and to people without looking them in the face. In fact, there's a late-night talk show that I can or may not recommend watching, and don't recommend it, and may or may not watch it myself. And one of the things that I love that he does, it's so funny, is he takes celebrities and he puts them on a couch and he gives them like a cell phone, and he has them read tweets about themselves that other people have done. It's called mean tweets. And so they read these tweets and other things that people have said about them. They've said to their face, they've said it over social media, broadcast it for everybody, and now all of a sudden the celebrity is reading what's written about. And some of the most horrible things we say about people on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and all of those other things. And we think that somehow that's not the corrupting talk that Paul is talking about, because it's not just coming out of our mouth, it's not necessarily directed at someone. Listen, I think if Paul could have had a vision into the future and saw social media, he would have said, look, you've got to make sure that when you talk about someone on social media, that no corrupting talk comes out of your keyboard. That no corrupting talk comes out of your computer screen or out of your phone. Just because you're not looking someone in the face, that doesn't mean that this doesn't apply to you. Paul says any kind of talk that's negative, that tears down, that rips down, that destroys, that kind of talk needs to be ushered out of your vocabulary. It doesn't need to be a part of what you say, type, message, anymore. He moves on. Look at the second half. He says this, but only such as is good for building up, as it fits the occasion, that it may have grace for those who hear. Now, there's a number of things in this little second half of the verse that I kind of want to point out there. First of all, he says, only as is good for building up. What this means is the language we use, the things we say, should be used to build up other people, not tear them down. It should be used to say things that will help edify them, that will help move them along in the right direction, rather than kind of pull them back. It's things that build up rather than tear down. The second thing that he says is as good for building up, and then he says, as fits the occasion. And I love kind of some other translations of this little Greek phrase, because it says it just a little bit differently. Here's what I think Paul's getting at. He's saying, first of all, every time in your life, everywhere you are, when you're walking around, the language you use needs to be building up rather than tearing down. But there are also other occasions. And as followers of Jesus Christ, we need to be aware and cognizant of all of these other occasions. We need to recognize that there are times when people need to hear a positive word from us. There's times when we as a boss can recognize our employees are having a bad day. There's times we can recognize our students are having something go on kind of weird at home. There's times where we need to be aware of our surroundings and make the most of every opportunity. Paul would say that too. And we need to learn to speak words to them in those occasions. We need to recognize that, yes, this is something that goes all the time, but that there are other times where we need to, and a special little word we need to give as a means of encouragement there. And then he also says that this word needs to build up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace. This grace is not a salvific grace. It's not to mean that, like, your words that you speak can, like, bring somebody into a relationship with Jesus. This grace, we might translate in the Baptist church, blessing, right? A blessing is this idea that, hey, the words I give to them, they don't necessarily deserve, they don't necessarily earn, but I give it to them freely. It's a grace, it's a blessing that I'm pouring upon them, because I recognize my words have the power to tear down or the power to build up, and I want to work to build up. And then lastly, don't miss this, husbands especially, don't miss this. To those who hear, what's that last word? To those who hear. Can I tell you something just about me? I've talked about my wife on this stage. I think she's amazing, right? I think she's beautiful. I don't know how she does all that she does, right? I've talked to you all individually, and I've told you about how I don't know how she goes without sleep and how she takes care of kids and me, because I'm like the third kid in the house. I don't know that I'm all that helpful, although I try to be, right? I'm like that. I'm like the parody of the husband that Foxworthy talked about when he used to do his stand-up bits. You know, Foxworthy's like, hey, your wife could be out paving the driveway. You can, like, poke your head out the door like, hey, honey, you know that garbage can in the kitchen? Went ahead and emptied that for you. You're welcome, right? And that's how I feel most of the time. And here's what I started to realize. We were having a conversation the other day. I do a pretty good job of telling you all individually and as a group how amazing my wife is. But you know what? I don't spend a whole lot of time just one-on-one me sitting down and telling her the things that I really love about her. Telling her the things that I think she does great. Now, yeah, if she does something that I don't agree with, or she disagrees, but she hears about that, but she often doesn't hear about all the things that I think she does that are so good, one-on-one. Listen, husbands, wives, teachers, parents, learn from this. Look. There are times that your significant other, your children, your students, your bosses, your employees, fill in the gap there, where they need to hear a positive word. They need to hear it from you, through their ears, not through someone else. Paul says, look, your speech needs to be building up. It needs to fit the occasion. It needs to give grace to all who hear it. There are times where you need to look someone in the eye and go, you're doing a great job. You're doing something that's amazing. You're doing it right. And I just wanted to say that. Do you understand? Your words mean so much to people. How much? Just imagine. How much do you think our society would change if just we would take this one verse, and just apply it in our lives? Just start talking about words that build up rather than words that tear down. Can you imagine what social media would look like? All of a sudden, we stop the gossip and the slander and the hatred and the he said, she said, you know what's going through the gossip mill, and we just kind of got rid of it and said, you know what, I'm only going to speak words that build up. What would it look like in our society if we were able to encapsulate, if we were just able to do this? Now, let me ask you this question. Who is it in your life that needs to be built up with your words? Is it a spouse? A husband? A wife? Somebody that always hears the negative and rarely hears the positive? Maybe it's a child. Maybe, Dad, you need to look at your little girl today and go, you know what? You're beautiful just the way you are. Maybe you need to look at your son and go, you know what? You have what it takes to be a man. I'm excited about the man that you're turning into. Maybe tomorrow when you go to school, you're a teacher and you have a classroom full of students, and you may know some of their stories, you may not know all their stories, but they all have a story, and every story matters to God. It ought to matter to us too. You know what? Maybe we ought to spend some time listening to them and speaking words into their life. You know what? You can do whatever you want to do. You know what? You're smart enough. You know what? I know you got some trouble, and I know that there's some issues going on. It's okay. Look, we're going to work through this together. You do your part, I'll do my part, but I'm going to go above and beyond and make sure that you succeed because I believe in you. Maybe for some of you that means that when you go to school tomorrow, you need to look at your teacher. You need to say to your teacher, you do an amazing job. I want you to know that you've taught me some history, you've taught me some math, but you just watching you live your life, it's changing the way I'm living my life. And you may never see that in me. You may never get to see me or know me when I'm an adult, but the things that you've done, I just want you to know they make a difference. They matter. They matter in my life and they matter in the lives of other kids. Just trust me, I know that. Maybe when you go to work tomorrow, you're going to have to look at some of your employees and they feel beat down. There are policies that maybe they don't agree with, maybe they're beyond their control, beyond your control, and you know it's hard, and maybe their marriage is struggling, whatever is going on, and they come into your office every day, and you may just have a little bit of authority, you may have a lot of authority over them, but you know what? You have the power to look at them and go, you know what? You can get through today. You can do it today. You know what? You matter to somebody today. You matter to me, and you matter to my God. Right? And I'm going to speak some words to build you up. Maybe for some of you all, that means you have to go into your office tomorrow and look at your boss, who's not a very nice person. Look at your supervisor, who maybe says some things about you that are not very loving, and go, you know what? I appreciate all you do for our group. Even though it may be very little. Don't tell them that. Right? Although it may not be noticeable, right? Although not everybody may. Look, I know you get up every day and you come to work because something inside of you cares about us. Cares about our company, cares about our corporation, whatever it is. And you can go and you can speak encouraging words to them. See, every one of us in here has someone in our life that needs to hear a word of encouragement. That needs to hear that a boy, that a girl. That needs to hear you can do it. You matter to somebody. You matter to God. You matter to me. I care about you. I love you. I think you're pretty great. Everybody needs that. We can be that for someone when we speak words of encouragement rather than words that tear down and destroy. I want to give you just a couple insights into me. Somewhere when I was in seminary, in fact, I pulled it out and was looking through it before the service. I meant to bring it up here to show you, but I forgot. Somewhere in the middle of seminary going to school, a professor told us that we needed to start what he called an encouragement folder. It's just that he said, get you an office, manila envelope, or whatever, And every time someone sends you a card or an email or a note that encourages you or tells you something that's going well or a win or a success or whatever, he said, take that, you print that out, you get those Facebook messages, you print them out, whatever it is you have to do, screenshot it and print it out and stick it in that folder. And he said, because listen, there are going to be days when no one said anything nice about you. And when that happens, you need to pull that folder out and open it up and be encouraged by the words that are in there. Maybe some of you need an encouragement folder so that you can be encouraged as you go through dark days. Maybe some of you need to write a note to fill someone else's encouragement folder. An email, a text message. Maybe you need to tell someone today that you love them, you care about them, you appreciate what they're doing. You think they're pretty great. Think they can succeed. I came across a story a few years ago. In fact, I wrote part of it down so I wouldn't forget. A story of a woman, named Jean Needich. Y'all know Jean Needich? If you know her, don't ruin the story. Jean Needich she's still alive. She's in her early 90s today, but she was a housewife and in the 50s and 60s. And was overweight. She had a weight issue, a weight problem, and so she went to the New York Health Department, and there they prescribed to her a diet, and this was the diet she was supposed to be on. And so she began to try to follow that diet so she could lose weight, she could be healthier. And as she is going through this diet, she gets about 2 months into it, and she gets on the scale, and she's had some progress. She's lost some weight, but she still had 50 more pounds to go before she reached her goal. And she was so incredibly discouraged. She didn't realize what it was she was supposed to do. And so she went and she called up a number of her other overweight housewife friends. And she brought them over to her house, and she said, hey, here's the diet that I'm on. I just wanted you to know about. You guys may want to join in on this diet with me, right? You may want to be a part of this with me. And they began to meet regularly, talk about their progress with the diet, and talk about how they could encourage one another to stay on the diet. And they kind of helped each other and encouraged one another until they had all kind of met their weight loss goals. Now today, 52 years later, 1 million members attend 29,000 Weight Watchers meetings in over 27 countries all over the world. How about that? How about that? Because one woman said, you know what? I can't do this alone. I'm going to have someone come along and encourage me and stand beside me and speak words that build me up and let me know I can do this. And now, 1 million people, 29,000 different meetings. We're seeing this succeed all over the country. One interview, they asked Jean Needich, they said, tell me, how did you come up with this? Like, what made you think that having a support group would be helpful? And she's made a statement. She told this story. She said, when I was a teenager, I used to walk through this park every day. And there the moms would gather to gossip. They'd talk about what was going on. They kind of were engrossed with one another. Meanwhile, their kids were out playing on the playground, and always there would be a number of kids sitting on the swing sets. No one would go push them because their moms were kind of engrossed with each other and the gossip of the day. And she said, so I would just kind of walk by, and as I walked through the park, I would stop and I would push the kids on the swing for a little while. And she said, you know what happens when you push a kid on a swing? Before long, they start pumping their legs. Before long, they're doing it on their own. And before long, they don't need the help anymore. That's what God put me on earth to do, she said. I'm supposed to go and give people a push so they can learn to do it on their own. I'm going to tell you something. We all get to a point in time in our life where we need just a little push. Just a little nudge in the right direction. Just a little tap towards some sort of encouragement that will help redirect us or build us up or make us realize that we can do it. And not only do you need it, but the person sitting on your left and the person sitting on your right, they need it. And the person sitting across the room, they need it. And if we're going to be followers of Jesus Christ, and we're going to utilize our tongues to benefit Him and to expand His kingdom, then we've got to learn to take the corrupting talk, the negative talk, the evil talk, the bad talk, the gossipy talk, the slanderous talk, and take it out of our vocabulary and replace it with words that build up as fits the occasion so that it extends grace to all who will hear it. Somebody in your life today needs a push. Who is it? This week, I wonder if you would do that. Would you pick up the phone and make a call? Would you go over to somebody's house and visit? Would you send an email? Would you send a text, a Facebook message, a tweet? Just go, you know what? This person is awesome. This person is doing the right thing. This person is moving in the right direction. And I'm going to give them just a couple words of encouragement to help push them along. To help move them along. And as followers of Jesus Christ, as followers of Jesus Christ, if we can learn to take this verse and apply it to our lives and wrap our heads around Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, let me tell you what will happen. All of a sudden, the people in the world that like Jesus but don't really like his church, all of a sudden they'll go, you know what? I don't know that I buy into the whole Bible thing or the Jesus thing, but that's a great group of people. I want to be around them. Look at what they say about each other. Look at the way they talk to each other. Look at the way they do it. Look how they build each other up. Man, I want to be a part of that. I want to know what's the motivating factor behind that. You know, if we could just wrap our heads around this, our community would be transformed just by the power of the people and the positive words that are in this room. Our community would be a better place. Our world would become a better place. And ultimately, we all would become just a little bit more like Jesus. That's the goal, isn't it? Who in your life needs a push? Are you willing to do that this week? Let me pray for us. God in heaven, thank you so much for your word. Thank you that you inspired the Apostle Paul to take up Bible space with this verse. And God, it's easy to understand, but difficult maybe to put into practice. So God, I pray that you would help us to take the truth that's here and apply it to our lives. I pray, God, that you would place people in our minds right now, husbands, wives, children, parents, grandparents, teachers, bosses, employees, students, whatever it is, who need just a little word of encouragement, just a little push, just something that may build them up. God, I pray that as we think through those people, may we be reminded that our words have the power to change lives. Our words have the power to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with someone. With our words, we have the power to lift someone up and move them in the right direction. And God, I pray that you would help us to remove all corrupting talk from our mouths. Speak only words that build up and encourage. God, we do love you. And we ask now that you would continue to move in our hearts. We pray these things